The exhaust system on a car is like its lungs, helping it breathe properly. It moves gases away from the engine, keeps things running smoothly, and reduces harmful emissions. Without a well-functioning exhaust, your car could lose power, sound terrible, or even overheat. But how does an exhaust system actually work? Why does it make such a big difference in performance? Well, in this video, we're going to show you. But before we do, if you haven't already, then please subscribe to Dynovox and also click the bell icon, as this will help you get notifications. We regularly upload content with helpful tips and advice, and it helps support the channel. On one side of the engine, you've got intake, and on the other side, you've got exhaust. Except for a few exceptions, like the rotary engine, pretty much every engine follows this layout. A key thing to note, in an inline engine like an inline 4 or inline 6, there's only one cylinder head, but with AV engine like a V6 or V8, you've got two heads. Let's talk about inline engines first. Whether you've got an inline 4 or inline 6, it's all the same. If you've got a transverse layout, in which engine is mounted sideways, you've got two basic options. Option 1, exhaust up front, intake in the rear, that's a front-facing engine setup. Option 2, flip it around, exhaust in the rear, that's a rear-facing setup. Both work, but they each impact the exhaust system a bit differently. Now, with a front-facing engine setup, you've got some perks. Since the exhaust is up front, it's further away from the cabin, so you're getting less exhaust noise inside the car, assuming soundproofing is similar. Plus, when you're running the exhaust all the way to the back of the car, it has to take a longer route and make more bends, which increases back pressure. More back pressure is actually great for low-end torque, but we'll get into that later when we talk about back pressure and its effect on power. But there are a few trade-offs. First off, with the exhaust up front, you're putting it in the path of the intake airflow. The intake air has to pass over those hot exhaust pipes before it hits the engine, which can mess with cooling efficiency. Also, routing the exhaust pipes around the engine to reach the rear of the car adds complexity, more bends, more work, and more hassle when it's time to service it. Plus, the exhaust might run close to the oil pan, which can impact oil cooling and ultimately affect engine cooling as a whole. Now, flip that setup to a rear-facing engine layout, and you're looking at shorter pipes, fewer bends, and lower back pressure, which is killer for top-end power. Also, with the intake at the front, it gets cooler air from the front grille, which helps keep the engine temps down. Colder air is denser, so the engine is pulling in more oxygen per intake cycle, which translates to more horsepower. That's the deal with transverse inline engines. When you go to a longitudinal layout, in which engine is mounted front to back, the intake and exhaust positioning doesn't really matter front to back. The key difference is that with this setup, once the exhaust gases leave the head, they need to take a 90-degree turn before heading to the back of the car. Now let's talk about V-type engines. Whether horizontally or vertically mounted, they all have two cylinder heads placed side by side. In most V-type engines, the exhaust is arranged on the outer sides of the two cylinder heads. Then it converges along the bottom or rear of the engine before being directed to the exhaust pipe. This layout is simple and reasonable, and the intake manifold doesn't need to be separated. It's directly arranged in the middle between the two cylinder heads. However, there are exceptions. Some V-type engines with turbos arrange the exhaust between the two cylinders. Although this layout makes the design much more complex and can increase the temperature in the engine bay, because the exhaust pipe is placed at the very center of the engine bay, the exhaust no longer needs to be routed from the outer sides of the cylinder heads. This allows the turbo to be placed closer to the engine, shortening the distance between the engine and the turbo. The shorter the exhaust pipe, the faster the turbo's response. Therefore, this design is commonly found in high-performance sports cars, focusing on performance. And let's discuss a more unique example, the boxer engine. Since the cylinder heads are horizontal, the intake and exhaust sides are no longer in a left-right relationship, but in an up-down configuration. The most logical design is to have the intake on top and the exhaust below, with the exhaust gases flowing downwards to the tail of the car. This is why the exhaust pipes of Subaru vehicles are located completely beneath the engine. Of course, I'm referring to cars where the engine is placed in the front. Some supercars place the engine in the middle or the rear trunk. In those cases, the exhaust pipes tend to twist and tangle together like a braid. The main reason for this is the limited space in the engine bay, which is too small and too close to the rear of the car, preventing the exhaust pipes from fully expanding. Now that you have some understanding of how engine layout affects exhaust, in this chapter, let's talk about each specific part of the exhaust system. The first part is the header. This is the most common header for a typical inline-4 engine. 4 separate pipes are directly bolted to the engine, forming a rigid connection. The main purpose of the header is to collect the exhaust gases from all 4 cylinders, mix them together, and then direct them out towards the rear. There are 3 main types of headers. The first is the integrated header, where the header is built into the cylinder head itself. So, on the exhaust side of the cylinder head, you only see one hole. The header is already merged inside. This design saves space, and for turbocharged cars, it helps position the turbo closer to the engine. With the exhaust exiting the engine and going directly to the turbo without having to pass through a long header, it greatly benefits turbo response and pressure. Additionally, with the header integrated into the cylinder head, the coolant flowing through the cylinder head can absorb heat from the header, helping the engine reach operating temperature faster during a cold start. Note that an engine's efficiency is at its lowest when it's cold, but it improves as the engine warms up. The second type of header is the most common, consisting of 4 separate pipes merging into one, like this 4-1 header. The third type of header is the 4-2-1 header, where 4 pipes merge into 2 groups, and those 2 groups merge again. This is the most common type for engines like WRX and STI. A 4-1 header has fewer connection points, so it's cheaper to manufacture and takes up less space. The 4-2-1 header is larger and more expensive, but it's actually more beneficial for increasing overall engine torque. To help explain the difference, let me use the example of WRX and STI. STI has high peak torque, reaching 393 Nm at 4,000 RPM. Meanwhile, WRX peaks at 350 Nm, but it maintains that across a wide range of 2,000 to 5,200 RPM. In this case, STI has better peak torque, while WRX provides more consistent torque overall. Think of it like a shooting competition. STI's best shot might be 10 points, but only one shot hits 10, others might be 3 or 5 points. WRX might not score as high with a 7-point best shot, but all its shots are consistently 7 points. In the end, the total score could still be close. So why do these 2 header designs affect torque output differently? It comes down to how the exhaust gases are expelled. The engine has 4 strokes, but only during the exhaust stroke does exhaust gas exit each cylinder. At other times, the exhaust valve is closed and no gases are being released. So, each pipe has to expel gas in independent bursts. When the exhaust gas enters a larger pipe, after a smaller one, it expands rapidly due to the diameter difference, creating a vacuum effect in the smaller pipe. This vacuum helps suck out the next burst of exhaust gas, increasing the efficiency of the exhaust system. The larger the diameter difference, the stronger the vacuum, leading to better exhaust efficiency and engine breathing. In a 4-1 header, when the 4 pipes merge, the resulting diameter is much larger. This difference can create a significant vacuum effect at a specific RPM range, improving exhaust efficiency and boosting peak torque. On the other hand, in a 4-2-1 header, the first set of pipes is much smaller, creating less vacuum. However, the second merge creates a second vacuum effect, which, although not as strong, lasts longer and helps improve overall engine torque. This explains why these 2 header designs have different impacts on engine torque output. Now that you have a good understanding of header structure, you're probably curious about how header length affects performance. For example, the famous water boiling sound from Subaru engines is caused by unequal length exhaust pipes. Thank you for watching this episode of Dynovox Insight. If you found this video helpful, feel free to subscribe to Dynovox, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. See you in the next episode of Dynovox Insight.